if you're, let's just say you're a medium-sized manufacturer, even selling direct, why would you want to go with distributors? Um, and I would say, well, where are your customers buying now? And partner with some distributors and take it one step at a time. And this is what I was, what we were doing at Modus here before I left was, looking at partners that would make some sense for them to include our product with what they were already selling, and move forward with it and see how it works, and then you can scale it.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Orrin Broberg. Orrin was the founder of Modus and is an executive consultant who works with companies to help them grow their revenue through third-party sales channels. And in our conversation today, we're tackling a subject that, quite honestly, we don't talk enough about on this program, which is how to effectively sell your products and services through distribution channels. I mean, after all, there are over 400,000 distribution organizations in the U.S. that are driving over $7 trillion in revenue as of 2021. So, very significant way for any company to look at selling their products. So we start by examining how companies are supporting their channels today to drive sales, navigating all the usual challenges, including how the seller wants to work with a vendor, but at the same time protect and really own the end customer relationship. Then we dig into how the channel landscape is changing, how buyer models are evolving rapidly, while vendor marketing and sales support seemingly are falling further behind. And Orrin and I also explore what the leading companies are doing to address this new reality, how they are reimagining their relationship with their distributors and their end customers. So we get into all of that and much, much more. But before we get to Orrin, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So let's jump into it.
Orrin, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Andy.
Good to see you again. So for people who maybe didn't hear our previous episode, previous conversation, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Well, a little background on myself. I started right out of college, like you. You were at Burroughs, I was at Xerox, and so I was at Mother X for about 7 years. And
I mean, those were
Mother
the
X.
These were the companies that trained people how to become salespeople.
Yes, back when training was a big thing, and you had processes and things of that nature, and I learned a lot. Believe me, I learned a lot there. When I left, I was a sales manager and successful, but then I went to work for Nortel Networks. Which was at a very interesting time in our history when they were breaking up Ma Bell, AT&T being divested into the R box. Remember them?
Well, just for the people that don't remember, they're being divested. AT&T was the phone company. And then they broke it up into these regional Bell operating companies called RBox, as you talked about. That's if you're a local, quote unquote, local phone company today, that's when it came into existence back in the mid 80s.
Yeah, and the only phone system before divestiture you could buy was from Western Electric, and AT&T phones and all that kind of stuff. Now, was working for Northern Telecom at the time, now Nortel Networks, and they were the inventors of the digital PBX, which is a big deal. And now at Nortel, we could distribute our products through these regional Bell operating companies. And so being kind of a mid-level marketing person I was with kind of a sales bend, I went out and met with the different sales teams of the different RBox. So I went to Pac Bell, I went to Ameritech and Bell South and all these places, and met with the sales teams that were selling what they called CPE, customer premises equipment.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they separated, central office stuff and CPE, right? So that was essentially doing a massive needs assessment, and I just thought it was fascinating because really focusing on the moments of truth. What happens when these people are in front of customers, and what are they selling, and what do they know, and how do we get it there, and what information do they need, and how do you support them, and all that kind of stuff. And what role then you go back to Nortel and say, what do we have to do to make this happen? And so we had great products, right? But getting that into the channel and with a brand new channel, and it was huge, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so just take a step back for a second. So what you're doing is Nortel, which unfortunately doesn't exist today either. But at the time, as you said, was pioneering this new field of these PBXs and so all these new entities that existed that were these massive entities and massive enterprises that were created out of AT&T, what was AT&T at the time, Pac Bell, you talked about US West, Southern Bell, so on, Bell South, I mean. They were going to become your distribution channel for your products. Yeah. So they would take what you guys were selling and go call on their corporate clients, their enterprise clients. And at that point, people were thinking about it. There used to be, many companies had those physical switchboards with operators making the connection. This was replacing that. And when you think about it in a real sense, it wasn't that long ago.
Well, yeah, from my standpoint, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, but here we are. I mean, now we don't even have a phone system. My last two offices and businesses I started, we haven't had PBXs, right? Don't need them. We got voice over IP.
Yeah, software.
And I could go into how I even studied, national labor statistics. You could see over the course of 10 years, hundreds of thousands of technical professionals shifting from central office and telephone company stuff to cellular and mobile. You could just see the whole workforce just shift. It was amazing over time. So we got a voice over IP. One of the companies I started we created a certification program called Convergence Technology Professional. I partnered with the Telecom Industry Association and it became a certification standard. It's still alive today. It was cross-training data and voice technicians using computer-based assessment tools and certification.
Right.
A lot of fun. But that's the kind of thing that I get excited about it. That kind of stuff. Applying technology to helping salespeople do a better job, cross-training. A company here in town called ADC Telecom. They've been acquiring and growing, and adding all the different companies. Yet they want one sales force to sell it all. Well, salespeople didn't know all this stuff. So, another company I started was training. So I did a lot of training for companies that were selling through distributors. We did a big needs assessment for Texas Instruments and calling on Arrow and folks like that that were big selling semiconductors.
Right.
So that's been my passion. So that's a little bit about me and what I've done and the companies I've started. And most recently, I just left the role as CEO and co-founder. I'm still a co-founder of Modus, the sales enablement platform.
Right.
And our target market, our ICP, we're manufacturers that sell heavy equipment through dealer distributor organizations. And so Caterpillar, one of our very first customers, and talking to Caterpillar dealers all over the world. I mean, Far East and as well as North America, South America, Europe. It's just fascinating stuff because it's a real challenge for the manufacturers to get it right. And
getting it right meaning what many wanted. And I remember, I worked at Apple, sort of in the early days of Apple, where we were learning how to sell through a channel, and we were trying to. What I was responsible for is helping these computer stores learn how to sell to businesses, right? And during this transition where PCs, personal computing went from sort of hobby to serious tools for business, and the concern always of the manufacturer or the company that's working through the distribution channel is. How do we ensure some sort of consistency in the experience the buyers have when engaging with our channels, whether they're next door or across the country or around on the other side of the world?
Yeah, and you probably saw too that a very small incremental improvement can scale in a broad sense to big meaningful numbers in revenue. The challenge of doing it well, and I have to say, many manufacturers today are still stuck in an old model, and they just sort of throw their hands up and say it's messy. We'll just put out a good product. Field of dreams marketing, right? If you build it, they will come. And the dealers just basically say, okay, we got it from here. We own the relationships. You stay out of it. And there's even this, the ongoing fear of, a manufacturer, an OEM going direct to the customers. Okay, that's always been in the background.
Oh yeah.
But so this is my passion. This is what I'm doing now. I'm focusing on, I want to help manufacturers get their distribution networks better, functioning better. There's lots of them out there. Looking at the statistics lately, 400,000 distributor organizations in North America alone, with what, $7 trillion in revenue, 2021 data.
Well,
I mean, that's mom and pops as well as big ones. It's crazy.
Yeah, I had another guest on the show not that long ago, and he was saying, I'm trying to remember the exact statistic, but we're talking about distribution and distribution channels that, I don't know, like somewhere between 70 to 80% of all sort of B2B commerce is transacted through a distribution channel.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we on this podcast and on most podcasts, everybody's sort of focused on this, this direct selling model. But the fact is that in the real world, the vast bulk of procurement and buying happens through channels.
Yes.
And we don't talk about that enough on the show. So that's one of the reasons I was really interested in this conversation happening, because it's like, yeah, I think there's this reluctance I see on the part of small companies that I deal with they see channels as being risky. And yes, there are risks associated with it, and you do have to be careful. I mean, for startups, I've set up distributors around the world, not all of them perfectly, or made great decisions necessarily the first time about all of them, but they can be invaluable in terms of accelerating your growth if you do it right.
Oh my goodness. And if you do it right, I mean, look at some of the beautiful models in the world right now. Let's say separate out from what I'm talking about, HubSpot. There's tens of thousands of resellers out there, and these are resellers that are it's synchronous with what they do. Okay, people that do technology integrations or create content for customers, that kind of thing. They sell HubSpot, they get another platform, etc. But HubSpot doesn't have to carry any of the selling costs. HubSpot doesn't have to do all the hiring and firing of salespeople.
Right.
And it's if you go through companies like them in their financial statements, you can see the leverage they have, and they work hard over time to build that network, and it's working beautifully. Plus, they have a great product; doesn't hurt either. But that's the kind of thing that everyone gets to. I mean, that's their unicorn, so to speak. But for manufacturers, it's a lot of work. It's blocking and tackling, but it's also they're prisoners of their own paradigms. And the way they traditionally have done it is you've got marketing sort of in manufacturers. It's a linear process. They hand off stuff to the distributor. The distributor does their own marketing and sales, and then everybody hopes something good happens. And that's the way it's traditionally done, and it's frustrating because you've got some other big dynamics are making that system broken. And one of the big dynamics is Brent Adamson has said, at Gartner, you've got the new digital buying model here in digital buyer engagement. You've got millennials coming in, and they don't want to talk to salespeople, and they want more information before they even talk to salespeople, and they want to be engaged, and they need to be nurtured, and they have very high B2C kind of expectations. And that going on at the same time, the distributors are becoming more and more frustrated and remote, particularly in the the COVID era, where you're having say inside plus as the sales model, the hybrid model,
right,
is making it even more difficult for their salespeople to engage with their end customers and have meaningful conversations. And they're trying to do it the same old way, and it's broken. And as a good friend of mine who works at an agency here in town, who used to be a customer, has said the ship is leaving the dock, and it's accelerating this separation. And so what manufacturers need to do now, they need to really be thinking about how do they engage end customers while bringing in distributors and having a collaborative type of model, not linear anymore. Think in terms of a triangle with, a customer here, manufacturer, distributor, all working together in a collaboration way to engage the customers and provide at the same time the distributor and the distributor salespeople the information they need to be a concierge, or Brent would say a curator of information to help support that relationship with the end customer. Okay. And so it's media, it's support, it's answering questions, these kinds of things. And so it becomes a system. It's not unlikely a DXP or some kind of e-commerce, depending upon the situation. You apply technology here to suit your model and your product and your market. Right. So that's the new model that I'd say best practices are moving towards now. But it all starts with focusing on the customer. And the other part is back in the headquarters, the marketing people, there needs to be a culture shift here between marketing and sales working closer together. That's so important. So
and I think it's important for people to keep in mind, though, is that the reason a manufacturer, and not the reason, one of the primary reasons a manufacturer is going to go through distribution channels rather than build a direct sales force, setting aside the financial considerations you talked about with HubSpot and so on, is that they expect that the distribution partners, the channel partners that they sign up, have pre-existing relationships and our business, in certain segments or with particular, customer sets or specific geographies, that, that investment has been made to a certain point where they're saying, look, we're through this, we're going to leverage their relationship because they're already partway there, right? They maybe already have a relationship with that client that we're targeting or this client set that we're targeting. And so challenges, well, how do we help them? Well, it's two challenges. One is how do we get them interested in us and command enough share of mind from them so that they focus on our product, but also how do we help them leverage the relationship they have already?
Well, a big way to make friends of your distributors, if you're a manufacturer, is sharing the data. So the distributors won't have the resources that manufacturers typically have. Using leveraging the technology. I mean, you take a buyer anywhere, and you have intent data that it may is not 100% accurate, of course, but it gives you some idea that if they're hitting your web pages and what are they looking at, and sharing the data with the distributor. This is where things break down.
Right.
Even today, most of the time, the manufacturers know exactly what's going on, but the distributors don't get the information that's actually useful. And that's the hard part. And so if you imagine being a salesperson for, say, a Caterpillar dealer in Wichita, Kansas, if you knew that this contractor out there, won this big bid, has been all over the Caterpillar site looking at, the particular model of an excavator, that's useful information, right?
They're market preps.
And I know, and Caterpillar is frustrated because their own structure and their own information systems can't get through some of these firewalls that are built up by the dealers to get information through. But when they can, you can have actually useful data and useful for the salesperson and give the information they need. But again, the salespeople have to realize they're in a different role now. Okay. Many times now, the CAT salesperson is calling on somebody half their age. So they have different expectations, and they want information to help them make better decisions, not just specs and brochures. So
yeah. Well, I mean, but do you really think though that in the past the buyers were satisfied with specs and brochures?
You need that. You need that.
Yeah. But there's this sort of false narrative. Not to get too far off the track, but I think there's this false narrative about just how different millennial buyers might be from the previous generation of buyers. I mean, the information you need to be able to make a decision is still the same information you need to make a decision. And I think, and I would contend that when you're making decisions that have elements of risk associated with them, whether it's risk to the enterprise or risk to them, perhaps from a career standpoint. That suddenly this notion that they don't really want to talk to salespeople, I think, flies out the window.
Well, I mean, intuitively, I would agree with you. And the sort of the flip side when I talked to Brent about this is that even millennials in the new buying model, they have to talk to salespeople in the situations they make the high level purchase or high risk purchase, like you're referring to, say a $300,000 excavator or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If they never talk to a salesperson, then the risk, what was the percentage of dissonance, post-decision dissonance, is way higher. You're very likely to be dissatisfied with your purchase if you don't talk to a salesperson somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
But I will say there's more information available today than, if you want to go back a generation, if you will, and how people would make decisions a while ago. It's almost too much information now. And too many options. And even going back to before you make a decision, you have to understand what kind of problem do you have and defining the problem. It's more than just digging holes in the dirt. It may be about specific problems and things you need to consider. So manufacturers typically have been really good at top of the funnel types of marketing, if you will. And then they provide spec sheets and brochures for somewhere later in the funnel, but they're not really nurturing that buyer all the way through to help support the distributor. And that's what some of these new models are advocating, which makes sense to me. So if you're somebody who's thinking about a new excavator or a new piece of equipment for your factory or whatever you're going to get, then you're looking at websites, you're showing up on intent data, and the manufacturers, I think, now have the obligation and the wherewithal to be supporting and nurturing that particular, providing information there, but also getting a distributor involved to provide information for that, early mid-funnel kind of types of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think the challenge is always for manufacturers, and the frustration for manufacturers is that the information flows tend to be one direction.
Yeah.
So, they'll send stuff to the distributor, but to ask a distributor to, hey, keep us updated on what's happening on these accounts, and so on and so on and so forth is always sort of the challenge. So, I mean, how as a manufacturer, is sort of the best way then to work with a distributor to say, look, we're not just talking. This really needs to be a partnership. It's not just, not just happy talk, because we are, we're carrying a little bit more of the water for you on the front and top of the funnel. How do we help you optimize at the later stages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's where you got other tools like my old company Modus come in. So that'll help you in mid funnel. And
so explain this for people who don't familiar with Modus, what you guys do.
Well, in the sales enablement platform, you're talking about really trying to get media in the hands of the sellers, what they need, when they need it. You call it just-in-time training as well. Perfect for product launches and announcements, program announcements, that kind of thing. It's a way to sort of package a message and have assets to go along with it to support the message, and it helps establish the salesperson as in a sort of a consultative role to the buyer, particularly in B2B. So that's what Modus does. It's the platform that sits inside of this whole ecosystem that you'd set up with your distributors. And that was by and large the bread and butter for Modus, was working with Toro, Caterpillar, Bobcat, Graco, on and on. That's what they did, and the dealers love it.
But on this idea of enablement of channel partners, though, I think this is still a very problematic area. It has been forever, in terms of manufacturers really doing a a consistently excellent job of enabling the sellers within their channel partners. But there's lots of things that contribute to that. I mean, I've seen it working with clients that work through distribution channels that, the channel partners, tend to not be as diligent in their hiring practices in terms of who they're bringing on. So, some of the raw materials doesn't meet the expectations that the manufacturer has, or they don't invest in regular training. Is what can manufacturers do to in a way that gets buy-in from the channel to make those investments? And because it's always this tension you talked about is channels are always worried about the product being pulled right by the manufacturer, or the manufacturer going around them. So there's always this sense of reluctance about investing in a way that benefits the manufacturer.
I know that there's enough angst to go around between the manufacturers and the channels, and bad things happening. But you really have to support the channels, and you have to be out there talking to them and get understanding. You have data, and there's a lot of data you can get about, you say, what particular distribution partner is engaged and maybe not engaged. There's data that on your media usage, regardless of the platform you're using. You can get it down to the rep level. You can see who wants to be involved. I mean, that's one thing. You can get data about that, and you can get data about what reps know and what they don't know, and but you do need feet on the street, and that's where you have this middle group of people, if you will, representing manufacturers, calling on the dealers to support them, in addition to the technology platforms that are available. There are hundreds of them now that it can either the training, the e-commerce, the incentive programs, and all these different platforms that you can depending upon what your needs are, what your product is, where distributors are, and all those kinds of demographics. You can go to psychographics. This is why I find this challenge so interesting, and this is what I like to do. And you have to get out there and talk to the distributors, and talk to the leadership as well as the salespeople, and come back and bring that back to the folks at the manufacturer and say, this is what I see. These are some gaps, and this is what I've done in all my previous jobs. We've been doing this with Modus. When you've got a platform. I'm free of a product. I'm more agnostic, but still, even with Modus, you're looking at, you're talking to a manufacturer about their distributor problems. They don't have the media. It's usually about content. You're talking about sales enablement. This is the issue: content and media. Now we can go a little more holistic about that and talk about systems, processes, and things of that nature. And why are you spending all this money on a marketing automation system and all you're doing is email campaigns? You don't need that, but there's other things you can do to accomplish the same thing that are more synergistic with say other systems and what you're trying to do, and maybe even sharing data with the distributors too.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about that as sort of things companies need to do as they evolve their distribution or their channel support programs. So what are the things the company should be focusing on to move from where they might be today to a more modern model to support channels?
Well, you got to focus on the end customer, and it'll say in the moment of truth. Let's just focus on the customer and what is their digital buying journey. Who are they, and where do they go for information now? The old it's a statistic, and it's true, and it's been borne on many times. 70 to 80% of all the media and content that manufacturers create for their distributors are never used, and that's a huge number. That's a lot of money. That just means that they're throwing it into a black hole. They throw it out there and hope it gets used. What if they really needed to do is focus on customer centric rather than distributor centric? Talk about where the The moment of truth is when things happen and how things are bought at that time, and where the media goes in at the right time, and what do they need, and who delivers it. So that would be step number one.
But they need to do that in conjunction with their distribution partners, though, right?
Of course, yeah, that's part of the triangle I was telling you about.
This is not turning your marketing department loose to go talk to customers and then say to your distributor, bestow upon your distributors or your channel partners, hey, here's what we found out. It's to work with them to gather that data.
Absolutely, and that's what we've been doing from the very beginning for all my companies, whether it's training or the Modus sales enablement software. You get out and you talk to the dealer leadership first, and you talk to them. They look at everybody synchronous on what we're trying to do here, and roll up your sleeves and do a needs assessment. It's really the old-fashioned needs assessment you used to do, and you understand where the gaps are and where the strengths are. What else do you do? Well, you look at the technology. I mean, technology is everywhere today,
right?
And there's stuff in there that it probably isn't being used enough or effectively, and there's other stuff that probably could be replaced or upgraded. Right now, there's no, in the analysis I've looked at in the technology for channel partners, there are a few vendors that actually come close to providing a turnkey all the way solution, but I think it's very industry specific stuff. Typically there's no one vendor that does everything you need. So you're gonna have to think in terms of a system and things working together and supporting this vision of what the end product looks like, the end behaviors. You're looking to gain mind share, so it has to be easy to use. Of course, it has to be the kind of thing that you want to reach all the way through to the end customer. And even at Modus, we had end customers using our software as a way to communicate with their own admin, whether it be like providing content to their own systems admins and these kinds of things. And so you can daisy chain some of this out, but everything's different. Every situation is a little bit different. So it's using the technology, engaging the buyers with personalized media. Of course, you've got the flow of information back and forth and sharing it with the distributors, and the inference data, real time available on mobile and computer, whether they're going to be offline, online, sales tools optimized for specific selling buying scenarios. There's so many things you could be doing now, and be in a position to support your distributors, really providing a value add to your product. Okay, so whether it be sales support, ongoing support, manufacturers can't do that, won't do that. But and I would say the last thing that you need to be doing now too is on the manufacturing end and also the distribution end is marketing and sales typically are in silos. Well, they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what each other's doing. They're not working in collaboration. It's a culture change, and it's really sort of a leadership. Leadership has to address some of this. And there are companies, at Modus and previous companies I was working with, just if you don't have that and you run into someone, it's not going to work. And we had to let clients go and fire clients. This is not working. The culture is bad.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's hugely problematic for channel partners because I've been in the situation where it's the case where they have both marketing and sales talking to them, and they're not in alignment. That's really, you really want to avoid that in all cases. You have to have single source of truth. You're dealing with your channel partner. So they're focused, they understand what the mission is, what they need to accomplish, what the resources are for them. I've seen that happen on multiple occasions, and it's channels, they'll end up choosing one they think is more credible, and that's not necessarily the one you want them to choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so that's. So you asked me what are the three things? Those are the three things. When you'd be looking at it's not easy.
No, just sort of closing question though is I think and I see this in my work fairly frequently, is companies and smaller companies just reluctant to look at channels. And oftentimes, even in the software world, where channels would make a logical play, is there's this sort of insistence that no, we need to be able to do this by ourselves, right? We need to build this infrastructure, the sales infrastructure, and so on. And it's like, well, sure, to some degree. But one of the easiest ways to go out and test is with channel partners.
Yes. If you start with who is your go back to your target customer. Who are they? What do they look like? And where do they buy it today? I want to say before there was a Home Depot or Lowe's, some of the commercial equipment from Stanley Black & Decker you could only get through direct sales, or like Hilti, they still do jobbers and things like that. Now you can walk into Home Depot and just get what you want. Well, why do they do that? Well, we call it technology, or with just the distribution model there was not working. So now we're going to go retail. Now people are going online. You can get a lot of stuff, and just bypass is distribution altogether and dealers. And that's what happens if you don't keep things moving. That's when the ship leaves the dock, and I'm going to find a new way to get what I want now. So
I think a lot of that, especially in the B2B space, is Neil Rackham wrote about this back in his book Rethinking the Sales Force, which was 20 plus years ago now at this point. But he basically made the point. It says, in the absence of any sort of differentiated value from the channel,
correct,
customers will buy from the channel that adds the least cost to the transaction. Thus, if you can't add value to some of these commercial tool sales, sure, understandably migrate to Amazon or Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. So that really becomes the challenge then for channel partners and manufacturers supporting this. How do you continue to make the channel worth the price of dealing with it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's I don't know. I mean, just getting back to it sounds simple, but it's a lot of moving parts, as you can tell, in these bigger manufacturers, these larger, more diverse type of distribution models, like Graco, for example. They had VARs, they had integrators, they had retail, big box retail, all these kinds of things moving their products. They had different product lines and these kinds of things. Very complex, and it's hard to keep up with all that stuff. Again, but the numbers are big, and one little bit of improvement is very meaningful to the top line.
Absolutely. Especially for small companies. I ran sales of a number of startups where we actually needed to use distribution to break into overseas markets, for instance. Right? It was just too expensive for us otherwise to try to do, but we knew we had a product that was well suited in several of these markets. But the cost of us trying to do it directly would have been prohibitive. Distribution.
But again, going back to, I think, your original question, I think you asked was, if let's just say you're a medium-sized manufacturer, you've been selling direct, why would you want to go with distributors? And I would say, well, where are your customers buying now? And partner with some distributors and take it one step at a time. And this is what I was, what we were doing at Modus here before I left, was looking at partners that would make some sense for them to include our product with what they were already selling.
Exactly.
And move forward with it and see how it works, and then you can scale it and repeat it. And so that's exactly the kind of thing that you do with a smaller manufacturer. You look at the possibilities. Your bigger market, you can't address it with a direct sales model.
Right.
If let's just say if T-Mobile or AT&T or Sprint, if all they had were direct salespeople, how many of us would have cell phones? How many do you think they would have sold? No, but now you got big box retailers, you got all these different retailers and resellers. The cost of the product goes down, the quality of the product goes up. Everybody gets more feedback on how they, what people want, market, and that's how it becomes a commodity. Otherwise, you're stuck back in Western Electric dial telephones. It's like
the old big telephones,
pay phones. Yeah.
Yeah, or pay phones. Yeah. Well, yeah. For me, it's just people listening to this. You're thinking about how could we, what are some strategies for growing sales? Excuse me. And if you're not thinking about using channel partners, you should. Works for many, many products. Obviously, you have to make sure the margins work for you. The margins work for your distribution channels. But if you can do that and you can support them, for me, it's companies I ran as growth accelerators across the board.
Yep, very, very much so.
Yeah. All right, Orrin. Well, thank you very much for joining me. If people want to connect with you, learn about your new venture, what's the best way to do that?
Well, OrrinBroberg.com.
OrrinBroberg.com. Excellent. And you are on LinkedIn as well, I imagine?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Always been on LinkedIn.
It's now sort of surprising to look back and realize just how long we've been on LinkedIn.
I know. It's a little scary, isn't it?
Yeah, but I wish I'd started using it the way I use it now back a long time ago. Anyway. All right, Orrin.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Andy, good talking with you.
Talk soon.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I am so grateful for your support of this show. And I want to thank our guest, Orrin Broberg, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have a moment, if you could leave us a rating or a review, let us know how we're doing. We'd certainly appreciate it. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.